Hey everyone, welcome to the next class here. We're going to talk about a few little things. Primarily errors. I wanted to cover a small kind of chunk of class on just certain problems you're probably going to run into, maybe not during class, but definitely at some point during your careers. And I wanted to talk about some solutions that we have. So I'm kind of going to go from least important to kind of more severe kind of solutions and some of the problems that you can get from that. So um, I have my crate here, but we're just going to work with a box just to kind of talk about a little bit of this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is resetting X forms. You may have heard me say it before, or I may have made you do it. I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail of why we reset our X forms and exactly what it does. So when you make a box or any sort of piece of geometry, so let's just hide this here. So I'm going to make this just 100 units all around. So it's 100 by 100 by 100, right? No big deal. So that's all well and good. Now I'm going to use my scale tool. Go up here, switch to scale. I'm going to non-uniformly scale this thing on the X. Now what you might notice is as I'm doing that, in my modify panel here, under parameters, my width hasn't changed at all. But down here you can see that I'm scaled by 277%. Just do a nice round number, 200. Oh, that did it uniformly. My bad. So let's say we did, I scaled this a whole bunch of times now. If you go up to your scale over here and right click on it, you'll be able to see, it's 400 by 400. So I could even, in here, I could put down 100. There you go. So it's scaled all funky, right? It's 400% on the X and then still 100% on Y and Z. But as far as the parameters are concerned, it's still the same length, width, and height as I made it. Now, the reason for that is the way that scale is applied in 3D Max is that it's, you think of it of almost like a modifier. It's applied to, on top of your object, and it's kind of applied to anything that that happens to it afterwards. It's like an invisible kind of modifier. Now, there's two problems that you can run into with this. Well, I'm sure there's many, but the two we'll cover today that are kind of your biggest ones are things like modifiers. So let's remake this box here. We'll talk a little bit about what modifiers can do. So let's make a skinnier kind of box here. We'll do 10 by 10 by 100. We'll do a bunch of height segments, and we'll duplicate these boxes. So now we have two. But for this one, I'm going to do also a height of 10, and I'm going to scale this one. So now they're pretty much the same box, but this one's scaled with the scale tool, and this one is the parameters are they were inputted when I made it. So the regular one, the one that was made, let's throw a bend modifier on there, slap an angle on it, no problem, bend's fine. So you'd assume this one would work the same way, but what ends up happening is this. Now this makes probably not a lot of sense when you're looking at it. But basically what's happening is it's trying to apply this bend on a very stubby box, which is 10 by 10 by 10, and then the scale is being applied to that afterwards. So let's take a look at what that looks like. If we right click on our scale tool again, you'll see here that I've scaled it by over 1,000%. If I take this back down to 100, that bend will look correct. It'll be on a stubby box, but it'll be correct. So the scale is actually doing it after the fact, even if you did it before you applied that modifier. It's just how scaling works in Max. So definitely keep that in mind. It will mess up some of your modifiers and things like that. Now let's take a look at the next thing that it would mess up in this case, which would be, let's get rid of this bend modifier. So we have this box here. Let's get rid of this modifier as well. So we have these boxes. I can take down my height segments here so it's a little less confusing. Let's take a look at the unwrapping modifier. So I'm going to go here into modify. I have it on a shortcut, but I'll just do this for the video. So we'll do U, unwrap UVW, and let's open up this unwrap modifier. All right. So by default, whatever, it's just a box, no big deal. So usually when I start unwrapping, I will go into mapping and just flat map my box. And what this will do, which is a very nice thing to start with, is it flat maps each face based on whatever degree you mapped it by to its actual proportions. So you see here, that's that face right there. It's as long as it is over here. It's the exact proportions that I need. So I know if I throw a texture on here, let's say a checker pattern, for instance, um, Max 2017 throws these sweet numbers there at you. That these guys are nice. They're perfect squares because the proportions are perfect, right? It's exactly what the box is, which is great. It's what we want. A good way to start your mesh. Now let's take the one that was scaled. Let's just make sure it's scaled again by 1000%. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to throw an unwrap modifier on there. So I use my shortcut. Open that up. So it starts off the same, squares, no big deal. So let's do the same thing now. We're going to go map, flat map. It made all of my faces boxes. So even though that face there is super long, when I flat mapped it, it made it a box. Again, because the unwrap modifier kind of works before the scaling is applied, which I know is confusing because the scaling is already here, but it's just one of those things you're just going to have to know that Max does really poorly. Now, the reason why you don't want this is now if we throw the same texture on there, you see these squares are hella stretched out because, well, because this is wrong. This is not what the box actually looks like. So, I mean, we could, scale that and do it manually and stuff like that, and that's fine, but not really a good starting place for what you want to be doing. Now, that being said, with both of these problems, they can be solved by Xform. So you go into your tools, or utilities, sorry, little wrench, used to be a hammer, hit reset Xform, and click reset. That's going to add an Xform modifier on there. You can right click and convert it to an editable poly. Now what that did is if we go into our scale tool and we right click it, you'll see here that our local values are at 100% now. Which means it's just taken whatever scale you've applied and kind of baked it down into the actual object, which now means this thing is what it actually looks like. And now if I throw a bend modifier on there, it'll bend correctly. If I throw an unwrap modifier on there, it will flat map correctly. So you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches by X-forming anything that you've scaled or have done anything too crazy to before you start working on it. That being said, there's one thing you should be careful about. Sometimes you're going to have objects like this long box here, and you're going to want to place it on a certain different angle. So let's say I wanted to place this guy on whatever, random 46-degree angle, and that's fine. Now I'm going to take this box and I want to put another one right here. I'm going to manually be placing these objects for whatever reason. So what I can do, which is really nice, I can just switch to my local view. My axis will align to the actual axis of the box. And now I can move along that axis as many times as I like, right? So I can rotate, move, right? Really good for placing objects, doing that kind of stuff, which is great. So if you've rotated an object and you're working on it that way, if you've scaled it as well and stuff like that, you're like, oh cool, I'll X-form it and it'll all be great, and that's all well and good. But there's one problem. So now if I go to X-form, I do the same thing, it will actually reset your gizmo and will accept the XYZ coordinates, XYZ here. It will reset them back to this no matter how it's rotated locally. So this is now its original local position. So if I switch to local, nothing happens. This does not change anymore because this is how you've reset it. It's gonna bake down this gizmo as well, which now becomes a pain in the butt trying to move this thing, especially if you reset it on some crazy axis like this. It doesn't happen a lot because we don't overly place things the same way we do in game engines and Max. But something you should be aware of. I've caught myself where I like using my local object for whatever reason, and then I can't anymore. So so keep that in mind. Xform, really good for solving scale problems and those kinds of things, but can definitely screw up some of your stuff if you're not careful with it. So that's a quick little breakdown of Xform and stuff.